I remember the first time I dove under a wave. It was like a new world. It was incredible. I'm Carly Wilson. I live on the Gold Coast of Queensland, Australia. The ocean at my back door. I'm 8 months pregnant, and I want my little girl to experience the beauty of the ocean I came to love. But becoming a mother, I'm quickly learning that somewhere along the line, this became popular. And what I saw one day changed my life.
As they go up into the stratosphere, the pressure plus the cold causes the balloon to explode in a very distinctive way, so it looks a heck of a lot like jellyfish.
You think the turtle's going to survive, and all of a sudden it just dies, and you find a helium balloon in its stomach. It's not much fun, let me tell you. More people need to be educated about this problem.
The more I kept digging, the worse it seemed to get.
Sea turtles target balloons above and beyond what is being found in the environment. So if they see a balloon, they'll eat it. It's a very slow process. The animals do not die quickly.
How much time do we actually enjoy a balloon release before a ban strikes up? And for that, you potentially kill so many animals.
You talk to most people and they will recognise how wrong it is for someone to go and drop litter on the ground. Why is it that setting a balloon into the air is seen as something different?
I went in search of answers.
So the balloon industry pulled out of our interview.
And science to bust the myths.
Balloon industry specifically says latex balloons are biodegradable and that they are harmless. That's baloney.
They're so insistent that latex balloons are biodegradable.
I have never experienced that a balloon would shred like this.
Balloon litter is definitely not a myth. Balloons are causing a threat across Australia's beaches.
Probably about the only conclusion you can draw is that it definitely causes masses to accumulate in these animals.
And found the confronting truth behind our favorite party product.
When I started, I seriously thought this was just going to be a film about balloons and sea turtles. Like, I seriously thought that's all this issue was.
I feel like passing out. I'm not going to pass out, not like that.
But I had no idea I was going to be finding out so much stuff about kids and choking, and it's just freaking me out.
No one wants to be responsible for hurting and harming wildlife. All we've got to do is go back and find alternatives.
Balloons released in South Carolina could make it to the UK. Balloons released in the UK have made it to Australia. This is a global issue, so everybody should be pissed when somebody releases balloons because they're trashing our planet.
I've spent most of my working life looking after wild animals. I've cared for them in wildlife hospitals, I've relocated them away from development sites, and I've researched them. But right now I'm taking some time away from my work to do something very different. I'm having a baby. The looming reality of this new life has got me thinking very seriously about the future. What kind of world are we leaving for our future generations? Our throwaway culture is causing damage to our planet and our ecosystems. When there's a garbage patch in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that's 1.6 million square kilometers, that should be a wake-up call that we need to change the way we live. Many people know the role that plastic plays in this issue, but it's not the only problem. About halfway through my pregnancy, my partner and I decided to do a gender reveal party. And gender reveal parties they're a new thing. They're really fun. Basically, what we did was we had a big barbecue, and the grand finale was bringing out this big beautiful cake, and we cut it open, and surprise, the inside of the cake was pink, and that's how we revealed to everybody that we're having a little girl. But when I was planning the gender reveal party, I was on Pinterest and looking up different ideas, and I discovered that there was this really big trend of people releasing balloons to announce the gender. And that was something that really concerned me because I've worked with wildlife for a really long time, and I've seen the things that animals eat. And it's not as if balloons just fly up to heaven and the angels catch them. Like, they obviously have to come down. And after Alice was born, I decided I needed to investigate this problem further. I really want Alice to experience the beauty of the natural world. We understand that throwing rubbish on the ground is littering. So why do we not think it's the same thing to release a balloon into the air? It's often said that natural latex is 100% biodegradable. So are latex balloons as bad as other litter, like plastic? I'm on my way to meet with the Vice President of the Balloon Artist and Suppliers Association of Queensland. BASA Queensland is a member of the Balloon Artists and Suppliers Association of Australasia, the trade group for suppliers of balloons across Australia. I'm really keen to see what he has to say about balloons breaking down. Hi, Gunther.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Pleasure. The latex biodegrades. It'll take a couple of months to biodegrade. I mean, it would obviously depend on where it is. Out in the sun, after about a few days in the heat, it gets rather gooey and sticky and eventually dissolves. Really, the latex is pure rubber with a bit of colouring adding to it.
On BASA's website, I found the study Gunther was quoting. This paper was published in 1989, so it's quite old. The main source for the science used by the balloon industry around the world is one study known as the Burchett study, or the oak leaf study. Every balloon website I went to had the same information, including the website for Gunther's business. They all describe balloons as natural and environmentally friendly because they're made of latex. Latex is a natural rubber made from the milky fluid found in plants, and while it may seem similar, it's not plastic. The first thing I noticed about this study was that the author was the technical advisor to the National Association of Balloon Artists in the United States. They're balloon artists. They're obviously going to have a really vested interest in an outcome that says that balloons are not damaging to the environment. I also found out that this report was never published in a scientific journal. It also was never peer-reviewed, and it was actually commissioned by the rubber industry itself. The Burchett study says that after a balloon is released, it rises to a height of 28,000 feet, where the low temperature and extreme stretching of the rubber causes it to shatter into tiny pieces, which then float back to Earth and are scattered over a wide area. The experiments consisted of testing how balloons break down in the soil, under UV sunlight, and under exposure to fresh water. Under these conditions, the balloons did start breaking down within 6 weeks. The balloon samples appear to be degrading at about the same rate as oak tree leaves and about 3 times faster than small pieces of wood. But they never tested balloons in salt water. Considering that over 70% of the Earth is ocean, Surely many balloons end up there, and what happens to them?
In terrestrial systems, it actually breaks down relatively quickly because it gets broken down by UV. And in those scenarios, yes, they do. They break down lovely and relatively quickly. However, as soon as you add water, and as soon as you add salt water, it's a completely different kettle of fish. And these they act much more like a plastic polymer than they do as a rubberized or latex type polymer. Fresh water, they break down slightly faster than they do in salt water. Salt water slows it right down, and the same goes with the gastrointestinal system of the sea turtles, which of course gets inside as black, and they just don't break down.
Hello.
Hi. Dita Melson did her honors project with Kathy Townsend as her supervisor and studied if balloons are biodegradable in salt water.
What I found is that there was a slight increase in the weight of the balloons in salt water, which was a little less than 5% increase for all of the balloons.
Wow.
Yeah,
so rather than breaking down at all, they got bigger. That's weird.
It is indeed. You would expect them to decrease when you're talking about degradation, but they increased in size. I think the difference in this increase in mass is due to this process called osmosis. Which is a process where water from the surrounding area is absorbed in the surface layer of the balloon, and the salt in the water works as a force against this osmosis process. It's more like a preservative of the balloon.
That old study where they compared balloons to oak leaves, they found that the balloons did slowly start breaking down in creek water, but they never looked at it in salt water.
So one thing that strikes me about his study is that he dried the balloons before every weighing with a desiccator. That's not what happens in the environment. So why would you do that before drying them? Of course, they're going to be less weight because there's also water inside the balloon that's making the mass higher.
So far, it's not looking like balloons biodegrade in salt water. There was even a study about this published in 1988, a year before the Burchett study. It tested the breakdown of balloons in salt water, and after 12 months, the balloons were still intact and only changed in appearance slightly. So if latex balloons biodegrade in salt water at all, it obviously takes more than a year, which isn't helpful at all to the animals who might mistake them as prey in that time. Marketing them as 100% biodegradable and environmentally friendly seems misleading at best. So if balloons aren't breaking down in salt water, what's happening to them? I've come to the Sunshine Coast, where they're holding a beach cleanup event to get ready for the baby turtle season. The Sunshine Coast is the only part of the large state of Queensland where they've actually banned balloon release ceremonies.
Now today's all about making sure that we have clean beaches and clean waterways for the incoming emergence of our hatchlings this year. We have already had a few run, but we are expecting a lot more as the month goes on.
So 3 years ago, we got together with Reef Check Australia and some of the staff from Underwater World here, and we were having a real moment thinking about marine debris and the impacts on the Sunshine Coast. And we said, well, why don't we do something about it? And sure enough, we did. So that first year, we got about 90 to 100 people. We collected about 100 kilos of rubbish. And from then on, we've been committed to making sure they clean up for the hatchlings. It's an annual event. And it's not just about today, it's about empowering the people that attend today to be able to do this on every single day of the year, not just on the clean up for the hatchlings day.
Some cleanup areas may have hidden dangers such as snakes, jellyfish, spiders, etc. So please act with caution. As it is Australia. And make sure you keep an eye out in all the vegetation as well. Last year we had some people find some really old beer bottles that had been there for about 20 years. So let's get going, get amongst it.
I love cleanup days. They're like Easter egg hunts for grown-ups. You just don't get to eat what you collect, or at least you shouldn't. They even have a crew looking for litter under the water. And as I suspected, it didn't take long before we started to find balloons.
Today we're focusing on small hard plastics and floating plastics like your helium balloons. And the reason why we're doing that is because the hatchlings easily mistake those items for food sources while they're at that pelagic feeding stage of their life cycle.
Little babies don't know what to eat, so they eat anything. And once they know, they'll look at that and then they'll eat it, and they don't know the difference because they're just learning. Yes. And they break up into tiny pieces, so when they're eating, they're like, oh, that's tiny, and then they'll eat it.
I've been introduced to 2 volunteers from the turtle rescue organization Turtle Care. Since the start of the turtle breeding season 4 months ago, they've been collecting balloons off a 5-kilometre stretch of beach on Bribie Island, which is here on the Sunshine Coast.
Yeah, as you can see, it's a quite a large problem for us.
Yeah.
And we specifically pull out the balloons because we get so many of them.
So we try and keep the beach free of, this, because it'll just wash us back into the ocean.
And with this particular one, that looks for all the world like a jellyfish.
Yeah.
The Burchett study says that balloons shatter into tiny pieces before falling back to Earth, but these balloons are partially intact and shredded into tentacle-like strands.
Brittle fracture is what happens to latex or rubber balloons as they go up into the stratosphere. Once they get to a certain level, the pressure plus the cold as they go up causes the balloon to explode in a very distinctive way. Basically, the balloon becomes shredded. And then, of course, it falls back down after that. The disadvantage of that is, of course, it looks a heck of a lot like an octopus or a squid once it lands in the water itself. Younger sea turtles, during what's called the lost years phase, where they're out in the open ocean and just floating around on the surface and basically eating anything they happen to come across, if you look at what's in their gut and compare it to the environment, it's much more randomized. So if they see it, they'll eat it. However, what we did find with balloons in particular, they will target balloons above and beyond than what is being found in the environment. So if they see a balloon, they'll eat it. And we think that has to do with looking very similar to prey items.
I feel like if I was starving, I'd be tempted to eat that myself.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's soft. It's like a jellyfish texture.
Yeah.
I can't believe how many balloons they've found, considering balloon releases are actually banned on the Sunshine Coast. They think the balloons are being released offshore from cruise boats.
We live on the Esplanade and we see cruise ships going out. And then we can guarantee when we go over in the next morning, more likely than not, we'll find these balloons, strings attached, washed up.
But there are others that are quite obviously here, they're branded in commercial brands. So come off the land, blown out to sea.
And then come back,
It's amazing how much they really do have that look about them, don't they?
They do, look at that. Do you imagine that just floating? And,
amazing.
This one, look at that.
It's funny how some of them shred more.
Yes.
I think it's because they were blown up bigger, and that means the elastic stretches more.
Yes, she's very smart.
I'm touched by the amazing influence these 2 are having on their granddaughters and how passionate the girls are about conservation.
I've never seen
That's
such a big collection.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's really starting to hit home for me that if we don't do something soon about marine debris, our turtles are going to disappear.
These are a bunch of balloons that were given to me by a turtle rescue group on the Sunshine Coast.
I have never ever experienced that a balloon would shred like this. I would be very skeptical that it does this. Where's the strongest part of the balloon?
Well, I'm not sure. Down the bottom?
This would be the strongest part of the balloon. So why would all the bottom of the balloon burst, but not the top? So I would seriously question this evidence.
Well, this one's burst like that.
That's what possibly it might look like.
And this one as well.
You know, but
so that's not good either. That also looks very much like a jellyfish.
This is, if this was factual, not good.
I'm starting to wonder if the balloon industry is deliberately ignoring the science and the first-hand accounts of animals eating balloons to avoid losing business.
In America, the industry hired scientists to do an actual study to say what happens and where do they go.
Yeah. Well, that's my concern, because
if you go into our website, you'll see the full American study, and it was done back in the 80s, but really, in that sense, nothing has changed.
Well, what I'd say about that is that this is that study. It was actually never published in a scientific journal. It does say that balloons burst into many pieces, but then they give you this picture, and you can see that
it's
actually
strands.
It's strands.
Yeah, it's strands.
It's not actually.
That's right. I haven't seen that one, but I'd like to.
Yeah, I can leave it with you if you like. Yeah. I hung around Gunter's shop after the interview to talk with him a while. He really is a nice man, and I like him a lot, but I'm disturbed that he wasn't aware of how balloons are impacting wildlife. He clearly is getting his information directly from the Balloon Association because he hasn't even read the study he was quoting to me. The Balloon Association provides the suppliers of balloons with this information, and they're trusting that it's correct. I tried to set up an interview with the operations manager of BASA, the public face of the Australian Balloon Association, to find out why they're spreading this false information. So the balloon industry pulled out of our interview. It was all set, and then he promptly changed his mind about wanting to be interviewed. He did ask me some questions about my motives, and I answered him honestly. I was friendly, but I did tell him that I do think that balloons are a problem for the environment. And so anyway, instead of doing an interview, he sent me this document here. It says, over the past several years, our industry has occasionally suffered attack by individuals with laudable objectives, but who we would argue have not considered all the facts. It says in 2014, rubber was the smallest category of waste at just 1%. Balloons were not even listed. So in summary, balloons as litter is a myth. It's not supported by the facts. What I'm not seeing in here is the clear evidence we have of balloons that have been recovered from animals. You can't really look at that and decide that balloons are not problematic.
Just because you're not seeing animals wash up on the beach full of balloons doesn't mean that there's not an issue. You only see a tip of the iceberg ever gets presented on our coasts. I mean, most animals get sick and die out at sea and get eaten by something else.
All the different species of sea turtles that we've come across have had marine debris within their ingestion system. Any of those animals that are feeding on those open ocean environments we find are disproportionately targeting and having balloons in particular in their guts. Well, they're not actually hunting for plastic bags and balloons, they're hunting for their natural prey items. It's just unfortunate that plastic bags and balloons look a lot like their natural prey items.
He mentions Kathy Townsend here, which is interesting. Studies by Kathy Townsend found that the cause of turtle deaths was mainly due to the intake of plastic and of the entanglement in netting. Though it was stated that some latex particles were found in some of the turtles' stomachs, the cause of death could not be attributed solely to a piece of balloon. A piece of latex balloon would usually pass through the digestive system of a turtle or fish. First of all, he's making that claim based on nothing. A piece of latex balloon would usually pass through the digestive system of a turtle or fish. There's no source or anything for why he's claiming that. But how he mentions Kathy here, Kathy's paper that he's talking about specifically urged governments to take action against mass balloon releases because they found more balloons inside of the turtles than they were expecting based on the very small percentage that balloons comprise of overall ocean garbage. So he's twisted her words. Again, he says, thank goodness our industry is based on natural biodegradable latex. Again, they're so insistent that latex balloons are biodegradable.
If you do a quick survey of a beach, and this is how we get a lot of our information, we actually go and compare what's available in the environment for the animals to potentially feed on, and then compare that to what we're finding in the guts. So it's not like we're just pulling these numbers out of the air. We argued in that particular paper that as soon as you put it inside that sea turtle gut, it's dark, the pH is different, you don't have the same microbes as you do in the soil. They just don't break down.
So I just got an email from somebody else that's within the Balloon Association, and she asked me who the individual was that we mentioned in the trailer that had pulled out of the interview, and I told her, and she says, I'm extremely disappointed in him. He is our only paid person, and it's his job to look after this stuff and keep us up to date with info. I didn't realize the study was disproven. She's talking there about the famous oak leaf study that the balloon industry always talks about. Those of us in the industry have always been told that balloons shatter into tiny pieces. So when watching your video, I was stunned to see the jellyfish shape. That kind of confirms the suspicion I had that most of the people in the balloon industry believe what they've been told. They believe that balloons are biodegradable. They believe that they go up into the sky and burst into a million pieces and disperse widely. And they don't believe that they're, when they tell this to their customers, they don't believe that they're telling them the wrong thing. I really have thought that that was true this whole time, because you get a good indication of whether or not people are lying when you speak to them. But clearly, I've been speaking to this person at the very, very top of the Australasian Balloon Association and giving him scientific information and trying to meet with him. He canceled the interview, and even though I had sent him all of that information, he didn't pass any of that on to anybody else in the Balloon Association, even though he is the only person that is getting a paycheck out of this. And it is his job to make sure that everybody is informed and up to date with the latest scientific information. So that's really disappointing.
Certainly there are a lot of balloon manufacturers and suppliers who claim that balloon releases have no impact on the environment, but those portions of the balloon would take absolutely years to degrade in the environment. We certainly see the impacts of ingestion of rubber and latex from balloons and other sources in marine fauna. So certainly we see some animals that present to the wildlife clinic that pass those, and other times we find them causing obstructions, and it's really difficult to know exactly how much an animal has to eat or how large the individual pieces have to be before they'll cause an obstruction, but we certainly know that they have the capability of causing obstruction. And unfortunately we see that kind of ingestion pretty much every week through the animals that we're looking at.
I came across a picture that you took of a very young sea turtle, and it had actually swallowed a balloon almost the size of its entire body.
It came into the Taronga Wildlife Hospital. It wasn't doing very well, it wasn't eating, it just was pretty listless. It was floating in a tilted position, which is often a sign that either they have pneumonia or there's something in their intestinal tract. So he died in care after getting fluids and supportive care and attempts to assist feed it, give it a bit of nutrition, which when you look at the balloon in its intestinal tract, I guess it's not a big surprise that that was just too big for him.
Sea turtles in particular can get what's called a gut impaction, which is what we see a lot when the animals become what's called floaters, where they've consumed so much debris that the gut actually becomes paralyzed. It no longer undergoes the digestion process, and all the organics that are in there, instead of digesting, then start to decompose. The decomposition process creates gases, which then makes the animal positively buoyant. It prevents it from being able to duck dive down to feed. It prevents it from being able to get out of the way of boats, and makes it much more susceptible to being predated upon by sharks and other things as well. It's a very slow process. The animals do not die quickly. It can take months, it because reptiles, including sea turtles, are very good at surviving a long time without feeding. And so, it takes a long time before their natural resilience is outdone and they then start to undergo, or they basically starve to death over time.
Float syndrome is an absolute torture. That is a direct torture of animals. The condition of these turtles by the time they get picked up or washed ashore is an emaciated body. They're so skinny and starved. It distresses me to see balloons in the ocean. Sea Shepherd has a marine debris campaign that's really kicked off in the last year or two. We've got beach cleanups occur really quite regularly. Nearly every trip we go out there, we will find a balloon on the water. And as we get closer, we'll see that little string going off and going, another one of those helium balloons, and we'll pick it up every time. A month ago, we were out in the Gold Coast. We picked one up, and we picked it up and steamed along. There's another 2 out there. And we head out to sea and go and pick up those 2. And as we just take off again, there was another 2 and another 2, and we picked up 10. Now, if in that little patch of ocean that we were sitting in, we easily found 10 balloons, how many were released in that one release? It's litter. So simply, to my mind, we have laws against littering. You throw a cigarette butt down on the ground, there is a law against that and you can be fined for it. Why can't we apply exactly the same rule? We don't need new laws about it. We just need to acknowledge that letting a balloon go into the air is exactly the same thing. It's littering.
So we know that people like to celebrate, and for some reason some people like to release balloons as part of that celebration, but it's certainly not an activity that we would encourage. Certainly there are a lot of other ways of marking a significant occasion, ones that don't impact the environment.
Dude.
Oh man, look, he's all tangled up. Alright guys, this is why you always throw away your balloons after your parties. Look at this guy. Totally wrapped in a balloon, wrapped up from head to flipper. Look at this.
If you're releasing balloons that have strings on them, it's not even just the latex alone, it'll be the ribbon that's attached to the balloons that can wrap around wildlife legs or get into nest material and strangulate different portions of wildlife. So the latex and the strings attached to balloons can really cause quite significant damage to wildlife.
One party supplies company has made the decision to stop selling balloons. A lot of party stores, I'm sure, would be very, very concerned about giving up balloons as a sale item.
Yes.
And you guys were running this business, your parents, supporting yourselves with this business, and you decided to get rid of your biggest seller?
Yes.
What were you thinking?
Do you want to talk?
Well, we were thinking there's more to the story. We're an eco-friendly store. Yes, there are other eco-friendly stores around the world that sell balloons, but we didn't believe the story that we were fed about them being biodegradable and not being bad for wildlife. People selling balloons, they're just getting told from the balloon manufacturers, oh, they're biodegradable, they'll see that it's a good seller, so okay, so maybe they're not doing the research. We just felt more comfortable not selling balloons because of the research that we had done.
We actually tried to put them in our compost and see if they will biodegrade, and we had them in there for a year and they didn't. And that's when I felt really quite sick actually, that they weren't biodegradable.
Look, in the last month we've had a couple of calls, people asking us, do you stock biodegradable balloons? And we kindly tell them, well, they're not eco-friendly, so us being an eco-party store, we don't actually stock them.
People are actually consciously looking for eco-friendly alternative at the moment. Tissue balls or honeycomb balls or bunting. So this is a honeycomb ball, and they can be flat packed and put away for next party, and they can last quite a while.
I don't think that people are not prepared to pay $30 to get a nice piece of bunting which is going to decorate the house beautifully, knowing that they can use it for a long time, 10, 15 years they could keep bringing it out for all the events, for all the parties.
People are searching for us and we get a lot, I can't believe we found you, and finally I'm so glad that you're doing what you do. So I think there's potential for industry to grow and change and people to come up with new inventive alternatives to the balloons that we haven't even thought of yet.
You can see it, wildlife dying because of balloons, so why wouldn't you do something now?
I've been invited to the Australian Seabird Rescue Hospital, where they often see firsthand the damage that balloons do to turtles and other marine wildlife. The hospital's founder, Lance Ferris, lobbied the New South Wales government to ban balloon release ceremonies. Releases in excess of 20 balloons are now banned across New South Wales as a result of his efforts.
Hi! Good! Everybody, this is Carly.
All 7 species of sea turtle are either threatened through to critically endangered. The worst being the hawksbill turtle and the leatherback turtle, which have a 1 in 10,000 survival rate. They only breed usually every 2nd year, which means that they'll be breeding for up to 6 years before any of their young will make it through to adulthood, which is pretty appalling.
The hospital treats many turtles suffering from float syndrome.
Over the time I've been working at Australian Seabird Rescue, I've done about 50 necropsies on turtles and found probably about 10 turtles that have actually swallowed balloons and it's affected them. I'm sure there's many other sea turtles that have been affected by balloons, by swallowing them, that we don't get to see on the shoreline. So those balloons have been ingested and the turtle becomes really, really sick and they're floating on the surface and they may not make it to the shore. So those turtles, we'll never find them and we'll never know. So I think even 10 out of 50 turtles is an underestimation, definitely. So this turtle was rescued and has only been here for a little while, but it has already passed away. We've done all we can for this turtle. We've rehydrated it, we have popped it into fresh water to try and help remove all of the algae and the barnacles, but it obviously wasn't enough and this turtle hasn't made it. It was suffering from float syndrome and we're not too sure what it's actually eaten. There's a very high chance that this turtle has eaten plastic or a helium balloon. It's hard to say, but just from the amount of float that it's suffering from, it really wouldn't surprise me.
When a turtle is floating, it's vulnerable to boats, it's vulnerable to the sun, it's vulnerable to seasickness, it's vulnerable to starvation. It's a hideous man-made problem.
Not all the turtles that come through here survive, and during a necropsy of one, I noticed something very interesting about the sea turtle esophagus.
With these papillae, when they ingest seawater, it helps the food to get down to the stomach, but it also helps the water to get up. So basically they can keep the food and have the water out.
Right.
Birds and a lot of those other marine animals, if they consume something that they shouldn't eat, they actually do have the ability to create a bolus and remove it from their guts. Sea turtles, on the other hand, have downward-facing spines in their throats, and that's because they eat jellyfish in the open water. And so the idea is, as the jellyfish starts to get swallowed, when they go to open up their mouth again, the jellyfish would start to fall out, but what happens is the spines lock and it prevents the jellyfish from slipping out of its mouth when it goes to take the next bite. So then when it has another swallow and basically levers it down the esophagus to the point where the animal is actually consuming it, which is great if you're feeding on jellyfish. Not so great if you feed on something that you shouldn't be eating, because if it's in there and if it doesn't go to the other end, then it gets stuck. They don't have any ability to get rid of it.
I remember one sea turtle that was a hawksbill turtle that came from up around Kingscliff area in northern New South Wales, and it had 3 different colours of balloon that it actually defecated out and then instantly died, and when we cut it open it had more balloon inside it, and I would say that would definitely have been the cause of death for that critically endangered hawksbill turtle.
We know in the case of both the sea turtles and the shearwaters and a lot of seabirds that they certainly do eat squid as part of their natural diet. The squid that they do target is red in colour, and we look at the colours of the different types of things that we find in the guts of the animals, and it's not surprising we have a rather over-representation of red and orange colours in the guts of both the sea turtles and the shearwaters as well.
I've definitely found orange balloons in sea turtles, and I've definitely found orange balloons in seabirds as well. Gaza was a beautiful northern giant petrel who came into care last year, and usually when these northern giant petrels are found and rescued, they're just exhausted and they just need a bit of rest and some food. But after 3 days, Gaza still hadn't eaten anything, and one of the volunteers went over to the aviary and they actually witnessed Gaza vomiting up an orange helium balloon and nearly choking on it. And straight after he regurgitated the balloon, he started eating, and it only took us another 4 or 5 days until we got to release him. So yes, very, very lucky seabird.
When a northern giant petrel comes into care and has sunken eyes and vomits up a orange balloon 3 days after being in care, and you just think, what? It just doesn't make sense. And the amount of necropsies we've done and the amount of things that I've found inside of animals that just don't belong there. But with balloons it's so senseless. How much time do we actually enjoy a balloon release? How long do we watch for? I feel like possibly 45 seconds before a band strikes up. And for that, you potentially kill so many animals. No one takes responsibility for the plastic. No one takes responsibility for the cord. They just let it go. And it's one of those things that now that it's in my consciousness, I can't understand why an intelligent species that we think of ourselves, such as ourselves, would do something so destructive.
You think the turtle's going to survive, and all of a sudden it just dies, and you cut open that turtle and you find a helium balloon in its stomach. It's not much fun, let me tell you. So I honestly don't get offended by people who say, you know, we're the fun police, because I think it's just a lack of education. More people need to be educated about this problem.
So what's the extent of the problem? There's no way to know how many balloons are released by people every year, but we can get some hints based on the amount of balloons collected on beaches. In 2017, the Ocean Conservancy collected over 93,000 balloons from beaches around the world. And here in Australia, Tangaroa Blue collected over 22,000 between 2013 and 2016. But those are just the balloons we've found. How many more are still out there, luring animals to an agonizing death?
$1.5 million balloons into the early fall sky, sometimes looking like so many locusts. In 4 short minutes, it was over.
With the insanely huge balloon releases of the 1980s and various organizations and companies trying to outdo one another by breaking and re-breaking balloon release world records, environmentalists started to become concerned. This led to the infamous Burchett study, an attempt to minimize the issue. 3 decades later, balloon releases are still a concern. One organization making progress is Balloons Below.
It's been on Facebook for 5 years.
Yeah.
And it was probably about 3 years ago where it really started getting more followers.
Probably because like people all over the world are finding balloons everywhere they go, to the beach, out in the desert, in the woods, and all that, and then they look online for a resource or some kind of like information.
And then they find balloons below.
I've been hearing from the balloon industry that balloon releases aren't much of a thing anymore.
Yeah, they're the first ones that you'll see quoted in a newspaper article after they have a balloon release that people are complaining about.
Isn't that funny?
They'll be on there defending it. So they know that these balloon releases happen all the time.
Yeah, and then you turn on the news and it's like, oh, these people just released 500 balloons for a little Timmy and like breast cancer, and if it wasn't that popular, we wouldn't be finding all these damn balloons.
Yeah, look at them all.
The balloon industry specifically says on their website, and they'll write it to everybody that complains about balloons, they'll say, latex balloons are biodegradable, and as long as you don't have any ribbons attached, that they are harmless. That's baloney. This is released to balloon industry standard. All of these.
Yeah.
That's balloon industry standards. They're standards.
Clemson University in South Carolina is a school famous for its football. In 1983, at the final home game of the season, Clemson University released 360,000 balloons, setting a new Guinness World Record. Fans enjoyed the release so much that it became a home game tradition, and to this day, thousands of balloons are released at every home game as part of an elaborate pre-game ritual that has been dubbed the most exciting 25 seconds in college football. It has been estimated that since the record-breaking release in 1983, over 7 million orange balloons have been released by Clemson University. Balloons Blow and other environmental activists have urged the university to stop the practice.
We've been fighting with them for 6 years now. We wish that Clemson would brand their balloons because we find orange balloons all the time. And we always think of Clemson. You know what? South Carolina's state reptile is the loggerhead sea turtle. And South Carolina's own university, Clemson, sends off these turtle killers by the thousands.
In response to complaints, the university released a paper in 2012. The dissertation has never been published in a scientific journal, but it's regularly cited by the university. In the study, they took a number of animals, including 14 freshwater turtles, and they offered them small pieces of latex to see what would happen. At the end of the study, they necropsied all the turtles and found that some of them had latex in their guts, including 3 with substantial accumulation in their stomachs. However, the author concludes balloon releases may not be a problem for the environment or for wildlife, despite over 20% of those turtles having substantial accumulation. It's also worth noting that they killed all the turtles in the study after only 4 weeks of monitoring them.
I think the study shows pretty well exactly what they're saying it doesn't show. And I think that's probably about the only conclusion you can draw, is that it definitely causes masses to accumulate in these animals. Things like fish hooks and glass will pass through in many cases, but that doesn't mean you'd recommend feeding fish hooks and glass to animals. So just because these fairly large foreign bodies made of latex didn't cause any obvious problems during this particular period of time, doesn't mean that they won't, especially when you've got thousands of potential animals out there getting exposed to these sorts of foreign bodies. They're drawing a very long bow to conclude that a short study like this demonstrates that because these 14 terrapins didn't die, that there wasn't some sort of issue. Terrapins feed differently than marine turtles. They're a freshwater animal, and they were purposely fed smaller pieces. So I think they need to do more work on other species and for a longer period of time, and probably with larger pieces of balloons. I think 15,000 balloons in one game and multiply that by orders of magnitude all around the country, then there'd be potential for a massive problem. Even if it's only 1% of animals that ingest any significant amount of latex get issues, that's still a lot of potential problem. This study, to me, would support winding back the release of balloons and hopefully the phasing out of that sort of behaviour, in large public events, and hopefully some public education as well, to continue to minimise the release of these balloons, because studies like this show that there is an issue. I don't see how there's any way you can conclude that this study shows there isn't an issue. I don't know, that takes a fair bit of spin to do that.
Another sporting event that begins with a massive balloon release is the Indy 500.
69 years they've been doing those balloon releases. And for decades, they've been hearing about it from environmentalists, including little Girl Scouts who wrote them letters 25 years ago. Little Girl Scouts.
Oh my God.
And they said, Girl Scouts, you know what? Our balloons are biodegradable and they don't harm anything. So they went ahead and did it. So 25 years later, we're still arguing with Indy. They don't care. They obviously don't care because they're not doing anything about it. And they just open up the top of the tent and let 39,000 balloons go. And this is like in the center of the United States, right in the middle of migration season. And it just pollutes the whole Great Lakes region. It goes up to Canada. It's just sickening. What a sickening display of environmental vandalism. Balloons released in South Carolina could make it to the UK. Balloons released in the UK have made it to Australia. This is a global issue, so everybody should be pissed when somebody releases balloons because they're trashing our planet. Everybody's backyard.
So balloon litter is definitely not a myth. Our research has shown through the Australian Marine Debris Initiative is that we do find a significant proportion of balloons being collected across beaches within the Great Barrier Reef. And that's a troubling statistic, especially for the marine wildlife, which is very special and unique across the Great Barrier Reef. What we really focus on at Tangaroa Blue Foundation is the actual source of the marine debris. And so when we're consistently finding balloons within our beach cleanups, we're thinking about, okay, well, where are these balloons coming from? So a part of what we were finding was the weather balloons that the Bureau of Meteorology release. The Bureau of Meteorology, we're releasing over 100 weather balloons a day. And what we did find is that of the weather balloons that were being released, 60 to 80% were ending up into the ocean. And that's just, again, some more data to show that a lot of the balloons that are not accounted for are ending up still in the ocean. Just like party balloons, weather balloons will float up into the sky, and when they reach a certain height, they'll burst and they'll end up looking like jellyfish. And because weather balloons are much bigger than your average party balloon, that's going to be another impact when they end up in the ocean.
Tangaroa Blue contacted the Bureau of Meteorology to inform them of the extent of damage that this type of pollution was having on the Australian marine and coastal environment. But the Bureau made it clear that they had no intention of changing the practice anytime soon. Tangaroa Blue continued to pressure the Bureau and inform the public. In 2013, they sent a report outlining the threats and impacts of the Bureau of Meteorology's weather balloon targets to the Bureau, the directors of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, and to all state and federal ministers.
Since the release of our research paper, the Bureau of Meteorology committed to phase out the use of weather balloons and look at alternative items to still be able to capture the weather. And so that's a really positive outcome of not only just citizen scientists getting involved in cleaning up beaches and contributing to the Australian Marine Debris database, it's actually helped us to communicate that data on that research level with a peer-reviewed paper to actually influence the change that we need. So that's a really positive outcome.
Finally, it seems like some progress is being made. But unfortunately, not all responses are so positive.
After we stopped a big balloon release in New Jersey, we just happened to get this letter postmarked from Trenton, New Jersey, which just is where the Balloon Council's headquarters are. And then all it said was, be careful.
The issue of helium balloons doesn't just affect animals in the environment, it's affecting humans too.
I need an ambulance at 3126, Alameda Drive, number 404.
Okay, what's going on there?
She can't, I don't think she's breathing.
You breathe. Okay, who is?
Okay, she's breathing, but she's really, no, she's not breathing. She's really hella fucked up. She had alcohol, she had helium. I don't know, it just came home.
Alcohol and helium? Okay, hold on.
Alcohol and helium.
Okay. How old is she?
Let's talk on the phone. She's a child. She's 14 years old.
14-year-old? Okay.
In 2012, 14-year-old Ashley Long died after inhaling helium at a party.
Ashley had asked to spend the night with a friend that lived in our own town, but sometime during that night, plans had changed, and the mom was sick and had asked her daughter-in-law to host the slumber party at her house. So without calling any of us, the woman came and picked up our kids, and the girls had told us that instantly when she picked up our kids, she started giving them alcohol. And my Ashley had never had alcohol that I know of. And there happened to be a helium tank in this woman's house in the closet. Brought out the helium tank, thought it would be funny for the kids to all start making their voices change. And one by one, the girls all did the helium. And when it came to Ashley's turn, she was the last one. It made her collapse, the girl said, within seconds of inhaling from the tank. Her autopsy had shown air bubbles that went to her heart and her lungs and her brain, which made her instantly collapse, and it caused asphyxiation.
What up, peeps? We are going to be doing the
helium challenge.
Oh my god, holy shit, it filled my lungs up.
So I'll just go about to buy the helium tank to do it.
Oh, helium.
Hold on. It worked. We're doing helium balloons.
I feel like passing out.
I'm not gonna pass out, not like that.
Just air out of one balloon is enough to end your life, you know?
Did it work? Oh my god.
And children, they copy what they see. And there's YouTubers out there that are imitating inhaling helium, and kids see that and they just copy it, and it's reckless. And they don't understand it can end their life.
I really like to skateboard and blow up balloons and suck in all the helium.
Everyone thinks inhaling helium is harmless fun, but there are more stories like Ashley's out there.
The gas company says helium gas displaces the air in your lungs in the same way that water does when you drown, and can quickly cause loss of consciousness, and you can stop breathing and you may die. 62 people died from inhaling helium in 2013, just in Britain. And in 4 years, in Australia, 79 people died from inhaling helium. 79 people. I've been looking the last couple days at assisted dying websites. They are advocating using helium for suicide because it's the most pain-free way to go. It says helium is recommended as a method of suicide because the supplies can all be obtained locally, legally, and without having to involve anyone else. This is where I'm conflicted. Again, if you have a terminal illness, but that might be a good thing. But think of how many children inhale helium just for fun.
And just like turtles, children are also at risk of choking on balloons. According to the US-based Consumer Product Safety Commission, of all children's products, balloons are the leading cause of suffocation death.
This whole thing's getting so much crazier now. Like when I started, I seriously thought this was just going to be a film about balloons and sea turtles. Like I seriously thought that's all this issue was. But I had no idea I was going to be finding out so much stuff about kids and choking. And I can't believe it. I was just looking at the records and it's like every year at least one child dies from choking on a balloon. It could have happened to Alice. Like it could have happened to her. I remember I was at a friend's house and I turned my head for a second and she had got into their bin and she was holding a balloon. And she's at that age where she just puts every single thing in her mouth. It's just freaking me out. It's freaking me out. Like how are these items how have they not been banned? I don't understand. I feel like if it was any other item, then there would have been a recall now, like for sure.
So our children and wildlife are choking on these bits of rubber. They're thrown away into the air to be forgotten, and they're littering our oceans and beaches. They don't biodegrade like the industry claims, and even if they did, foil balloons obviously don't. Then there's the bits attached to the balloons and what's inside them. Children are being taught to breathe in the helium, and they're dying. And on top of all that, balloons can cause electrical fires.
Holy shit! Good job, balloon people!
And even plane crashes. So what can we do about it? Some local councils have taken steps to ban balloon releases and classify balloons as litter. But to fully solve this problem, we really need our state and federal lawmakers to take action. I decided to head to our nation's capital in Canberra to see if I could get any politicians to listen. It seems like listening isn't their strong suit.
The Queensland government won't talk to me. The New South Wales government won't talk to me. We tried to speak to the Environment Minister, and I even spoke to his advisor. He wouldn't talk to me. He said, no, we don't go on camera. So, another voicemail.
The best I got were a couple of emails. One from the New South Wales government detailing their policy on littering.
So their email says that littering offenses are depositing litter on land or waters in a public place or in an open private place. And then it's got a separate thing called aggravated littering. And aggravated littering, it says, is littering which is reasonably likely to cause or contribute to appreciable danger or harm to any persons, animals, premises, or property. So shouldn't that be balloons? Don't you think? Yeah. And the funny thing on the website, it mentions that as an example of littering, it says an example of littering would be throwing an apple into a garden. So how is it that you can release 19 balloons and that's okay, but you might get a fine for throwing an apple into a garden? Doesn't make sense, right?
It really is an interesting phenomenon, isn't it? You talk to most people and they will recognise how wrong it is for someone to go and drop litter on the ground. Why is it that setting a balloon into the air is seen as something different to throwing something on the ground? You know, we've got a cultural attitude that needs changing. It is completely illogical to keep going the way we are on this issue and a whole lot of other ones. And it is the role of government to step up and do this, to have the guts to go against that cultural idea and explain to the people why this needs to be done.
It's like our politicians don't think it's a big enough issue. But it is. Imagine if the last hawksbill sea turtle died from eating a balloon.
As far as I'm concerned, when I'm talking to the Queensland government, they regard the release of helium balloons under the Waste Act as an offence, because it is quite logical that it goes up, it's going to come down as litter.
Lady at the balloon place asked me how long did I need them to last, and I told them they only needed to get to heaven. So let's let them know.
I think people get away with it because helium balloons tend to be used at festivals, times of celebration, or times of commemoration. Quite often it's seen as, well, you're a wowser attempting to stop people commemorating someone's life or someone's birthday or whatever. So there's a difficulty and a sensitivity there to get involved.
Although I couldn't get anything from the Environment Minister, one woman's petition did manage to garner a response. Karen Joins created a Change.org campaign to have the use of helium in balloons totally banned across Australia.
If the use of helium was banned, that would stop balloons being airborne, and so people just wouldn't be able to release them. That's why banning the use of helium is key to solving the problem. One good thing about the petition with Minister Frydenberg, he accepted that balloons were a problem. So I think that's a major step forward, that the recognition is there. We've just got to get some action. If the message gets out to people that balloons are being banned because they're damaging to the environment, then it should spread wider as well. To my way of thinking, that by acknowledging that they cause harm to the environment, they should say no balloon releases at all, that just one balloon will cause damage.
It turns out that the push for legislation against balloon releases isn't only coming from the general public and environment groups. It's also starting to come from within the balloon industry itself. The recently formed Pro-Environment Balloon Alliance, or PEBA, is a group of Australian balloon industry professionals who claim to follow pro-environment practices.
Our big goal at the moment is to actually find a number of environmental groups who want to work together to lobby, whether it be local, state or federal government, we'd like it to be federal, to actually achieve a legislated ban on the release of helium balloons.
35 years ago in the 80s, there was awareness about the need to ban balloon releases. So now, I see there's an opportunity to complete some unfinished business.
And I think that's where we see a fantastic opportunity. You know, instead of looking at this as, you know, we're actually trying to achieve different goals, I actually don't think we are. I think the environmental groups and the majority of the Australian balloon industry, you know, actually would like to see the same thing achieved, and that is that legislation to say that, you know, the deliberate release of balloons is not okay. If we can have representation from the industry and we can have representation from environmental groups, then we are more likely to actually achieve that change.
I'm not surprised an industry group like this has arrived, because environmentalists are becoming increasingly vocal about balloon litter, and the balloon industry is sensing the threat. I myself have been promoting this issue on social media since we started making this film, and I've received a lot of nasty messages from balloon store owners. But this Balloon Alliance has a more reasonable approach.
And where does PEBA stand on this idea that balloons are totally biodegradable?
Look, it's a really difficult discussion for us to have, because although there is some element of biodegradability in a latex balloon, as there are in so many other products and items, we just don't feel that we have independent scientific research to show us that they are a biodegradable product, in the sense that, you know, they're going to disappear and not have any, impact on our earth. We can't have that, discussion. It's unfounded. What we can do is we can say that
They shouldn't be in the water, they shouldn't be left on the land, they shouldn't be released into the air, and so therefore when we do use the product, which we feel we can still use responsibly, we should dispose of it in the correct manner. The catchphrase that we're trying to work towards is pin it and bin it. That's exactly what should happen, and that goes out with any balloon deliveries, or that's handed to a customer when they come and pick up in store.
This new organization has surprisingly given me a glimmer of hope. It's awesome to see that even within the balloon industry, there are people fighting to see balloon releases become illegal. It's time that we all demand stronger legislation around balloon litter and put an end to the reckless ceremonial releases of balloons. As for balloons that won't be released, well, it's not up to me to decide what the best course of action is. Maybe PEBA is right and there is a way to use them responsibly, but considering the many risks, I'm just not convinced it's worth it.
No one wants to be responsible for hurting and harming wildlife. All we've got to do is go back and find alternatives.
If the governments won't take action, it's up to businesses and consumers to enact change. There's one business that's been on my mind since I saw one of their balloons at the Sunshine Coast cleanup. I sent Ray White a photo of the balloon, and to my surprise, they got in touch and we arranged a meeting.
What was your reaction when you got my email?
My initial reaction when I saw that picture was shock. It immediately came home to me. This is the problem. When you see a balloon that looks exactly like a jellyfish and it's got a Ray White logo in the middle of it, that's not something you can ignore.
Helium balloons were one of Ray White's cheapest and most popular promotional materials, with offices ordering a combined total of almost 30,000 balloons over the last 12 months.
We're a very curious organisation, and it certainly was the start of a process of digging. And the minute you start scratching the surface and understanding not just the risk to sea life, but the shortage of helium generally, the danger to human beings of inhaling helium, there were three very compelling reasons for us to make the decision to withdraw balloons from our promotional offering.
It's very tempting just to do the cheap option or the popular option, but to do the right option, it takes some balls.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys have them.
Yep. Yep, I got big balls. Put that on.
Ray White replaced their branded balloons with reusable bags, water bottles, and coffee cups. It's so encouraging that they took this action to make sure that never again will one of their balloons end up in critical sea turtle habitat.
I think the reality is that you can't know what you don't know.
Right.
I didn't understand until you presented me with this.
Yeah.
Anyone looking at this, that says it all.
It's a non-sustainable industry, and it's going to die out. The world is changing. People are moving away from unsustainable products, and they're not going to buy this single-use crap and put in a finite resource, helium, and set it off. Why purchase something that's going to turn into garbage in a day or even a couple of days? It's still going to turn into garbage. People aren't going to buy into that crap anymore.
When you learn about this stuff, you can't do that stuff anymore. And if you can understand something about what happens to our wildlife, helium-filled balloons is a no-brainer. It's absolutely a no-brainer.
It's as simple as not supporting balloon releases. I don't want there to be nothing left for the next generations. I don't want that to be our legacy.
It's a depressing subject. However, I'd like to approach it with optimism. I think we can do something about this. I think this is something that is not beyond our human capacity to make a difference about. The consumer has so much more power than they actually understand. This is really something where the individual can make a significant difference.
Sometimes it only takes one person to say something, and it only takes one voice. Other times,
You need the whole world.
it takes the whole world.
No one wants to be a party pooper when it comes to the use of balloons. It's about being responsible about the product that you're using. And when you're an industry provider around a particular item, that's actually causing a significant threat for, say, marine wildlife, and it is a key threatening process, You do have to take some level of responsibility.
I think the balloon industry is a little on edge.
This journey has opened my eyes to problems I never knew existed. It's made me much more conscious of my impact on the rest of the world. I now try to reduce my environmental footprint as much as possible. I avoid plastic and choose reusable products whenever I can. We still have a long way to go, but I'm hopeful that if large numbers of us can start making small changes, we can leave this world a better place than we found it. For ourselves, for our children, for future generations, and for all the other living creatures who we share this planet with.
This is not the only time that we've chosen not to change. Think of what we leave behind. Think of what we take away. This is not the only time that we looked the other way. Guarded hearts and narrow minds, we could quiet lose this way. When will we care about the messes that we make? Tell me now, how is it fair to believe we're not to blame for our mistakes that we